Good afternoon, and welcome to the on-record edition of the Rockbridge Report. I'm Melissa Powell, and joining me today is Cindy Crance, the Director of Instruction for Rockbridge County Schools. Thanks for joining me, Ms. Crance.
It's my pleasure.
So the big news recently is that the Rockbridge County School District is considering consolidating its middle schools. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that plan?
Sure. And again, we're still in the talking stages, though we have applied for a $15 million grant loan that has no interest, and so that really helps us as we're planning in terms of meeting the costs that would be involved in that. But we're still very much in the planning stages when we're looking at buildings and timelines.
Okay, and why exactly is a loan needed?
Because Maury River both middle schools have quite a bit of age on them, and our programs and our needs have changed a great deal since then. And there's the issue of energy efficiency and those kinds of things that make operating schools an issue. So as we're looking at combining schools and renovation, there's a cost involved with that. And of course, bringing more students into the school would require additional space and that kind of thing. And we're coming into the 21st century, so there's lots of technology needs and space needs that are very different than they were back when those buildings were built back in the 60s.
Okay, and why exactly is there a need for consolidation?
There's a couple of issues. You know, everyone is trying to be more cost effective. Nobody's funds are increasing these days, and we're certainly having to live within our budget like everyone else. But also we've seen a decline in enrollment. Our population in Rockbridge County attracts lots of retired folks, but they don't have young children coming with them. And so our space needs are not the same as they were again 20 years ago. Therefore, if we combine both schools, we have a nice sized middle school.
Okay, and what's the desired timeline for consolidation?
I'm not sure where we are with that. I know that we're looking at developing a timeline that makes sense for students and teachers, that allows for planning and allows for students to feel comfortable and programs to be developed fully as the school becomes combined and we move forward in this kind of project.
How do you think parents and students would react if consolidation becomes a reality?
I think parents have already expressed certainly their concerns about change, about the size of a school that would be larger than either one had been before, and the transportation issues. And those are certainly always concerns that we want to hear and that any parent would have questions about, and we expected that. A lot of those questions have been answered, and as we move forward with the project, we'll be able to give them more details. But I think parents have heard this when we were discussing the combination of Effinger and Central. And I think parents saw that even though we didn't have a long planning period for that the administration, the principals of those two schools were very sensitive to the needs of parents and students, and that went so smoothly that I think that there's a great deal of trust that was built that will do that and continue to be sensitive and wise planners and be in tune to the students' needs as we look at the middle school project.
Okay, you mentioned transportation. Do you think consolidation would greatly change bus routes or the number of buses needed?
Interestingly enough, what we suspect will happen, and Scott Hanna, who is our transportation director, we jokingly call him a wizard. He is amazing at figuring out how to transport students in the most efficient way and still knows every child on that route and the parents and the driver who's picking them up. We actually expect our routes to be able to be more efficient because we won't have to make as many stops, and we won't have to get to a school that's tucked back off of the main thoroughfares as Rockridge Middle is now.
Okay, you talked a little bit about the merger between Effinger and Central,
yes.
And I just wanted to ask you, as the Director of Instruction, how do you feel that consolidated school now is doing this year?
They are doing great, and I had a personal interest in how Effinger was blended in with Central Elementary because I was a former principal of Effinger. So it was very near and dear to my heart, and I live in that community and I know those folks really well, but it's been so smooth. The students seem happy. All the feedback that I get, that I've heard, is very positive, and they're just doing great.
Okay, and I know Effinger Elementary was one of the schools in the district who had really high test scores for adequate yearly progress. How does it feel to see a school that was so successful close down?
Well, again, it was very near and dear to me, but what we saw with that, or what we expect to see, is that Central will just be an even stronger school. It was a strong school to begin with, combining with another strong school. We expect the great things to continue to happen. As a matter of fact, recently, Central had an event called Fall Festival. That was a tradition that we had at Effinger around the Halloween time, rather than dealing with traditional Halloween excitement and that typically happens. We centered it around a Fall Festival day and had a day that was filled with lots of different kinds of alternative learning and activities. Central did that this year in recognition of bringing in their Effinger families to the school, and I heard wonderful feedback. Everybody thoroughly enjoyed it. Parents were able to come together at the new school and work together to have a great event for students.
Okay, and we mentioned AYP, or adequate yearly progress,
Yes.
and I know this year was particularly hard for the state as a whole with test results, but can you update me a little bit about which schools in the district failed to meet standards and what they're doing now?
Certainly. Natural Bridge is our only elementary school that did not make AYP this year, and they are just in their first year of improvement. Like you said, they have a lot of company with schools around the state in being in the school improvement process. I think the good news is that because we've had experience with that before, Fairfield Elementary had been in school improvement and rapidly came out, that we have some lessons that are learned and that we can work with Natural Bridge so that they can be successful and out of that process in the next couple of years.
Okay, and what about, I know you talked to me earlier about Moy River Middle School was another one.
Right. Moy River actually did make AYP, Rockbridge Middle did not. And both of those schools have made a great deal of progress over the last few years in their math scores and their reading scores. Rockbridge Middle School fell just a little below with one of their subgroups of students that were disadvantaged. But again, we're talking about probably less than a total of 3 percentage points for both reading and math combined in not making AYP. So we know they've got lots of strengths to build on, and we expect that they'll make AYP next year. And of course, the high school did not make it because of high school graduation. And that's a whole new calculation. When you look at what graduation rates are, that changes depending on which calculation figures are being used. So there is a group of folks at the high school that are working on project graduation to take a really intense look at what's contributing to that rate, and what can be done to include students and make sure that they're crossing that stage successfully. And we're looking at that systemically as a K-12 project, because we know that graduation goals begin in kindergarten. So we're all working together on that.
Okay, and what exactly is the district doing to make sure that in the earlier stages of a student's career, they get the instruction they need in order to make sure they have a high graduation rate in high school?
We've worked with schools to ensure that they have additional materials that are needed to instruct students who are struggling in reading and math. We've also reconfigured our schedules so that every day in elementary school there's an absolute minimum of 30 minutes that's set aside for additional instruction in whatever area that student needs. And not only is the time there, but the assessment piece is there so that we know exactly what every student needs to work on. And those are assessments that happen weekly and every 9 weeks and on a regular basis, so that we're not waiting to just use SOL data at the end of the year.
Okay, and switching gears a little, I know the Virginia Department of Education requires that each school district updates its gifted students' needs every 5 years. So how has Rockbridge County School District been handling that process?
That was actually a year-long process that we worked with Sharon Patterson, our gifted coordinator, last year, and she met with administrators, with gifted coordinators, with the Parent Advisory Committee to review our former plan and to update it, looking at assessments, looking at how we address plans. You know, we now have plans for students who need intervention, who are struggling. We also have plans now for students who qualify for gifted services. So each student's needs are identified, and we've worked to bring parents into the process more by including a parent survey as part of the assessment, the entire evaluation process for a student becoming gifted and qualifying for the program.
Right, okay. And earlier you talked about graduation rates
Yes.
at Rockbridge County High School, and I know that's been a large issue for state, really. And can you just go into a little more detail about what exactly you're doing in the high school other than earlier years to combat that dropout rate?
We're looking at attendance. We're looking at providing opportunities for students to regain credit that are less traditional through online courses, looking at how we can be more supportive in summer school. If there's additional services that a student would need through the Community Services Board or that kind of thing, we're providing that. We have a full-time nurses at the high school now that can support their health needs. And we're also looking at what other resources might be necessary to help students secure those other life needs that sometimes get in the way of students graduating.
Right. Okay, well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. It was good to speak with you, Melissa.
Definitely. And thank you for joining us. I'm Melissa Powell for today's On Record portion of the Rockbridge Report.